All right, so let's get back to kind of where we were. And that hopefully is going to take us. Oh my goodness. Having a lot of technical difficulties. Okay, are y'all seeing my screen?
No, we are not.
No. Ooh, okay, welcome 2021. Okay, goodness. All right, what about now?
Yeah.
You're seeing it now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect. I don't even know if it's recording. If it's not recording, that's okay. We'll worry about that at another time. Okay, so I think based off of what some of you said, that the last thing that you all were able to kind of see when I was together was just the title. Is that correct?
No, we were at like the division with like the zeros thing.
This? So everybody has this information so far?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so the next thing that we're moving into is, as you all kind of know, I always give you all like steps to success, things that are kind of help you, kind of a recipe to kind of walk through what it is that you do to become successful with this particular skill. So there's only 2 of them. The first step that you will do when you're dividing with zeros at the end is step number 1 is you're going to divide the numbers that are not zeros first. Okay. And the words are not, I chose to highlight because that's kind of an important part of that step. When you're playing with zeros, especially the zeros that are at the end, you want to use those last. So you're going to deal with the numbers that aren't zeros first. All right. Questions on that, or does that feel like that makes sense? Yes, no? Okay. All right. So moving on to step 2. Step 2 in being successful is a little longer. It's got a little more information involved with it. And it's also got some math terms in here that you all probably have not really heard of or seen before. But it says that if the number outside the division box, and we call that number a divisor, okay? You're going to hear me use these terms a lot throughout this chapter. And so you'll become more comfortable with them the more I talk about them and use them. But the number that's outside the division box is called the divisor. If that divisor is bigger than the number inside the box, and the number inside the box is called the dividend. If that number outside is bigger than the number inside, you're going to need to use one of the zeros inside the box. Now, I know right now it's just a lot of words, and sometimes a lot of words just sounds kind of confusing. But underneath this, you're going to see an example of what I mean, and then it's all going to kind of come together for you. All right. So I give you these 2 steps of words so that when you're working on something at home, or you're doing like the assignment that you're going to be doing here in a little bit for me today, if you need to go back and kind of re-look at these notes, re-look at these steps to help you with tonight's assignment, this is what these notes are for. Okay. So let's look at what I'm talking about in regards to these 2 steps. Okay, so let's write this example down. Let's write 2,000 divided by 5. Now, notice I chose to write it, and I always do this because this is how the book does it. I chose to write it in like sentence form, okay? Obviously, when it's written like this, that is not how you personally are going to solve this problem. You have to rewrite it, because in order to like see it, you're going to have to rewrite it in the way that you're used to seeing it, which would be how I have it written below, which is having the big number, which is called the dividend, that goes inside the box, And then the smaller number is the divisor, and it goes outside the box. Okay. And if those two terms are like a little bit confusing and it's hard for you to remember, like what was this number called? Was it the dividend or was it the divisor? If you can kind of find tricks to words, like when you say the word dividend, you kind of hear the word in. And so that should trigger your brain. Oh, the word that has the word in inside of it is the number that's inside the box. The word that has the divisor, like I see that O in that word, and I think of O goes with outside. That's the number that goes outside the box. Okay, so is that a little bit clear on like how to kind of associate those two words with which numbers they go with? So if you kind of think like dividend, the number in the box, that's the number inside the division box. The divisor, the one with the O, that's the one outside the box. Okay, so the example that I'm showing you here shows you an example of what step number 2 says up above. Step number 2 says that if the number outside the box is bigger than the first number inside the box, which as you can tell here, 5 is bigger than 2, I'm going to have to use one of the zeros. So that's why I underlined the 2 and the 0. So now instead of doing 5 fitting into 2, because I know 5 can't fit into 2, it's too big, I have to put 5 into 20. Okay, so now I ask myself, how many 5s will fit into 20? And this is where your multiplication facts come in. So you should say to yourself, oh, well, 5 fits into 20 4 times. And so that's where my 4 came from up here in my box. All right, so I'm going to take a minute to see, do any of you have questions yet in regards to where that 4 came from before we keep going? No, does it feel like it's pretty clear? Do you understand why I used one of those zeros next to the 2 to help me with that? Yes? Okay, so it looks like most of you feel like you're somewhat getting what it is that we're doing. Okay, so let's jump back then. All right, so now what do I do with these extra zeros here? Well, let's look down below. The last and final step says, then you just place the remaining zeros back into the answer. So once you have divided the numbers that are not zeros first, so 5 went into 20 4 times, now all I have left to do is put the leftover zeros back inside my answer. So down below, here you see how I've done that. I took my leftover zeros that I haven't used yet in the dividend, and I put them up here back into my answer. So this is called mental math. This is actually math that some of you could do inside your head completely. Like you wouldn't even need to write any of this stuff out because you are capable of looking at this problem and seeing that 5 would go into 20 4 times, and I have these 2 zeros left over, so that gives me a 4 with 2 zeros, gives me a 400 as an answer. But not everybody can do that 100% inside your head. So if you need to write it out kind of like I did here, then please do that, okay? Remember, in 2021, we're making new habits. So the new habits that we want to form are going to be habits that are going to make us successful, okay? So if you have to write it out so that you can see it a little bit easier, then make sure you do that, okay? Because 2,000 divided by 5 gives us an answer of 400, okay? Now, there is a way that I could check myself to see if I'm right. Does anybody know how you would check your answer to see if you were correct? How would I check my answer, Clayton, if I wanted to know if my answer was right?
You would multiply 5 and 400.
Yeah, I would take the answer that I got, which the answer that I got is 400, and when I would multiply that answer by my divisor, by that 5. And if those two numbers, once they're multiplied together, give me my dividend, my number inside the box, then I know that my answer is correct. And as we can see here in this example, it is. Okay, so this was an example of when the number outside the box was bigger than the first number inside the box. Okay, so let's look at an example when it doesn't happen that way, when the number outside is actually smaller. Okay, so I'm going to jump to another page, and on this page you're going to see here is another example, but this time the number outside the box, the divisor, is going to be smaller than the number inside the box, which is dividend. Okay, we're not going to do anything different. The only thing that we won't need to do is use that 0 with our number, okay, because we don't need it because the number's already big enough, okay? And remember, boys and girls, just in case you have kind of forgotten, when we're taking notes, notes are for things that you need to know. So if you already feel like you know this stuff, then it's not necessary that you write every single thing that Miss Malone puts on the screen down. If you need it, then write it, because you gotta have what you need. And some of us like love math, and math comes really easy for us. And so for those people, you may not need to write all this stuff down. But some of us, math is a little tricky for us, and sometimes it's a little bit tough. So for those people, you might need to write this stuff down, because you might need to see the steps, and you might need to see all the examples to help you when you're doing homework a little bit later today. Okay, so an example of this would be a situation like this one. Okay, so if I had a problem like this time, I have 8,000 divided by 4. Okay, so 8,000, that's my dividend. It's the number that goes in the box. So here it is in the box. And then the 4 is the divisor. It's the number that goes outside the box. Okay, so in this example, it's different because see now how my 4 is smaller than my 8? So 4 can fit into 8. So I don't need to use this 0 next to it. On the problem before, I had to use this 0 because 5 was on the outside and 5 didn't fit into the 2. So I had to put the 0 with it to make the 2 turn into a 20. But in this example, I don't need to, because 4 is smaller than 8. So now I can just go ahead and ask myself, how many times will 4 fit into 8? 4 will fit into 8 2 times. So that's where my 2 came up above. And then all I do is take my leftover zeros and plop them back into my answer. Okay, so again, this is an example of mental math. All right, questions on those? No? Okay, then let's go ahead, and I want you all to practice 2 of them. Okay, so I'm going to show you 2 that I want you to practice. I don't think there was anything else on here. I think it was more just me stepping through. Oh, this was how to check your answer, which we already, Clayton already kind of told us that. So to check your answer, you just simply take the answer that you got, which up above, we got an answer of 2,000, and you multiply that by the number outside the box. And then we got our number inside the box. So that's how we knew. You're going to see on your assignment today, a lot of times it's going to say like divide and check your answer. You don't necessarily have to check your answer for me, but checking your answer for yourself is helpful so that you know you're not turning in answers that are incorrect. Okay, so to check your answers, you would just do the opposite. You would do multiplication. And so that's how you would then check to see. All right, so let's practice some. Here's a page of some practice problems. Why don't we do, let's do problem number 1, and then let's look at problem number 4. Okay. So who wants to walk us through how to do problem number 1? Somebody who wants to walk us through it. All right, Asher, you want to walk us through problem number 1? Turn your mic on. And so what I'll do is I'll kind of write on the board what you tell me that we're supposed to do. Okay?
So first you have to line up your numbers.
Okay. So so tell me what's going to go inside the box?
The 1800.
Yeah, so I'm going to rewrite this and I'm going to put 1,800 inside my box. And what do you call, Asher, that number inside the box?
1800.
Yeah, but what's it called?
Or the dividend
Yeah, and good. And where's the 3 going to go?
outside the box.
And what's the 3 called?
The divisor.
Very good. All right, so now what's my first step? What am I going to do?
You're gonna see that the 1 is not bigger than the 3, so you're gonna move over to the next number, and then you're gonna divide that.
Yeah.
So you're gonna divide 18 times divided by 3.
Okay, so how many times will 3 fit into 18?
6.
Good, and that's why you got to know your multiplication facts. So you started out this by saying lining up your numbers. Where's my 6 going to go up above in the box, up above that box? Where should I put?
Above the 8.
Yes, very good, Asher. I want to make sure that that 6 that I just found to be part of my answer goes above the last digit that I just used. And that's really important because this mental math we're starting out kind of easy. But as we move into some tougher division stuff, if we don't line things up, it's going to turn into a big giant mess of numbers and then we're going to get confused. Okay. So I'm glad that he made mention of lining things up because you definitely have to make sure you do that. All right, Asher. So now what am I left to do?
Add your zeros.
Perfect. I just have to add these leftover zeros back into my answer. So Asher, how could I check to make sure that my answer was right? What would I need to do?
Times 600 times 3.
Good. And this is also something that we've already learned how to do, which we can do mentally. 6 times 3 is 18. And add your extra zeros there. And we notice we have the same number as we got inside of our box. So we know our answer is correct. What about problem number 4? Nice job, Asher. What about problem number 4? Who can walk us through that one? Reagan, you want to take charge of that one? All right, Reagan. So now this one's a little bit tougher looking because for this one, it has 2 digits outside the box. So like instead of just having 1 digit over here, I actually have 2. So Reagan, what am I going to do?
First you divide 8 by 32.
Okay, so she said she wants to start with just the 8 fitting into the 32. All right, so how many times will 8 fit into 32?
4 times.
They will. It'll fit in 4 times. So then what do you think is going to happen next?
And then you add the 0 from the 80 to the 4.
So I'm going to put it up here, you think?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
and then you add the 0 from the 320 to the 40.
Okay, so now let's check ourselves, Reagan. So if I have all those zeros that I have just put back into my answer, let's check to see if our answer is going to match. So if I take that 80, or I'm sorry, not my 80, but if I take my 400 that we got as my answer and I multiply it by my 80, do you think I'm going to get 320?
No.
Probably not. So I love how your brain was thinking, but I'm going to kind of help you out a little bit with this one because this one actually is a little bit different because it doesn't just have 1 digit outside the box like Asher's did. Asher's had 1 digit outside the box over here, but yours, Reagan, has 2 digits outside the box. So that means we have to kind of play a little bit different. We could just look at the 8 like you wanted to and say, well, 8 fits into 32 4 times. We could do that. But then you haven't used this 0 yet, have you? Have you used that 0 yet, Reagan?
No.
No. And because that 0's outside the box and then there's 1 inside the box, you know what happens with those is they cancel each other out. And so your answer just becomes 4. So that's one way you can go about solving that problem, is that if you don't want to use that 0 at the beginning and you only wanted to use the 8, that's one way you could have solved it. But the other way that you could have solved it, so let me write underneath it this problem again. The other way you could have solved it, instead of just using the 8, you use the 80. And you say, well, will 80 fit into 32? Will 80 fit into 32, Reagan?
No.
No, it's too big. So now I have to use that 0 with it. Can 80 fit into 320?
Yes.
Yes. How many 80s will fit into 320?
40.
Not 40. Just 4. Just 4 of them will. And if I check my answer, I come over here and I say 80 times 4, I end up with 320, which is the number that's inside the box. Okay? So you have to be careful. And if you're struggling at all, boys and girls, to do this kind of stuff inside your head, so like a minute ago, I asked Reagan, how many 80s will fit into 320? Well, instead of trying to do that inside of her head, she could kind of come over here to the side and say, okay, well, let's see what 80 times 2 is. Well, 80 times 2 is 160. Well, I'm trying to get to 320. Well, right now what you should be noticing is that 8 would fit into 32 4 times. But remember, those zeros are being used. So I bet it fits in 4 times. And once you figure that out, you'll see that's where your number came from. Okay. Questions on that, boys and girls, or does that feel like that sort of makes sense? All right. I want you to kind of practice some of these kinds of problems. Now, I do want to show you before we jump off here, though. There is examples down below. Oopsies. There's examples down below that we didn't get to. Okay. On your assignment this evening, you're going to see questions that look like the ones that Asher and Reagan just did, but then you're also going to see one that involve like these ends. Okay, this is what we call a variable. So obviously you don't have to freak out about those. N is just the missing number. So like this one right here is exactly what Asher and Reagan just did. How many 6s will fit into 2,400? You're just trying to find the answer. And the answer is what N is, okay? If it's the opposite, like this example over here, then it means they gave you the answer. You're just trying to figure out what number it is that's going to go on the outside here, okay? And so again, don't freak out just because you see that N variable there. All it means is that you're just trying to solve for the answer. Okay, so tonight your assignment, what I want you to work on, and this really, boys and girls, this shouldn't take a whole lot of time because most of these are mental math and most of these are things that you can kind of get through pretty quickly, all right? But your assignment this evening is going to be to complete workbook page 49 and 50, okay? So you have to complete all the problems on those 2 pages. That's due to me by tomorrow. And remember, we give you until the end of the day tomorrow to get that finished. So you actually have like more than 24 hours to complete this assignment. And then I also put a little note in here for you to remember to do your IXL minutes that are due by Sunday. Okay. Any questions from anybody about anything that you have due or that we did today? No? Okay, so remember, take care of your business, take care of that assignment, and then you're going to have to turn that thing in through the Google Classroom because until we're back together again in person, you got to turn your stuff in through Google Classroom. Okay? All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye, guys.
Bye.